Hello and welcome back to Second Breakfast. I was not planning on doing this episode, but then I read something that blew me away, and I want to talk about it to you briefly. This is a nice little solo episode, pulling at a thread a couple Tuesdays ago in our Batman Year One discussion, one of the most formative Batman origin stories written by Frank Miller. The art was done by David Mazzucchelli, and we played with this idea that Batman is an American myth, constantly retold and reformed. And that throughout my life, I've enjoyed him as a prism. He's a great way to understand and reflect or comment on the world around us. But Gotham City, all of those amazing villains, Batman himself, all of his sidekicks, it's a great framework for original fiction. There's so much that can be done with it. The past couple of years that Maggie and I have been really diving into comics, most of the back issues, most of the graphic novels and older stories I've read, almost everything has been Batman. And in pursuing the history of this character that I love and trying to learn more about the great moments that have defined and redefined him over the past, 80 plus years, this little quest I have has been clarified. I'm not looking for the sort of James Bond prism lens for Batman. I'm not looking for satire through the Batman structure. I'm not looking for a cultural snapshot of what the 70s, 80s, 90s were like by how this world is reinterpreted. I'm looking for an angle on this character. What is the story? What is this creative team's take on this character? And so far, the boldest ones, the boldest interpretations stick with me. Usually these stories are shorter, they're tightly plotted, and they're ruthless. Usually they kill people, which means they're considered Elseworlds stories, meaning they're not part of the main canon, which means you can do whatever the fuck you want with the characters. And that's what's really worked for me so far. Minor spoilers. Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller is Batman in his 60s, grizzled, old, bitter. What happens when he's dragged back into that world? Well, he kills people and breaks his code sometimes. Batman Year One, which is a 4-issue origin story we talked about a few weeks ago, doesn't have a villain. So who is the villain? Is it the vigilante criminal? Is it the cops in general? Is it corrupt cops? Is it politicians? All of these questions are posed. It's a really go listen to that episode. I really loved that discussion. There's also The Long Halloween, which becomes basically a parade through Batman's rogues gallery. You get to see all of the different villains. It's a holiday killer who only, takes a life, and it's always someone important on Halloween or Christmas or Father's Day or Mother's Day. And there's this dread as each new, minor holiday approaches. Like, what the hell is the holiday for March or whatever? There's a great ambiguity, or there's a dread leading up to a major holiday. It's just a really cool structure for a story, and it works well with comics when they come out monthly. I can imagine how awesome that would be to follow along with as it was coming out. You also have stories like The Killing Joke by Alan Moore, which is a one-issue series, and it's playing with the philosophy, the differences and similarities, the horror, really, of the two sides of the same coin between Joker and the Batman. You have The Court of Owls by Scott Snyder, which is a 12-issue series about the Illuminati kind of cabal that runs Gotham. That it's not the Waynes, it's not the Arkhams, it's not any of that. It's all the freaky elite up top. It's a beautiful, social commentary. You have 3 Jokers, which came out more recently. I should have known. Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok is the artist on that one. Pulled that right out of my ass. That one's 3 issues, and the hook is right there in the title. Why are there 3 Jokers? Who are they? Are they 3 Jokers from different eras of Batman? How are they all existing at once? What's the story here? It's intoxicating from just the hook. You have the Batman Who Laughs, who was a huge character from really the last 5 years, actually. This one I didn't really know about because I'm just getting into comics, in the last year or two. But this character is basically half Joker, half Batman. What happens when you mash them together? It really feels like when you're sending things in as a writer, if you're sending something to an agent or a publication, you have to kind of sell the hook for your story through what are called comps or comparisons. So you say Hunger Games meets Batman or whatever it is. I was in Barnes & Noble the other day, and this is how books are being sold now. X meets Y. So comps are a huge thing because attention spans are so strained by so many different forms of entertainment, so many mediums vying for our attention and eyeballs, that comps, this shorthand, quick, what's your pitch in 2 seconds, Batman Who Laughs. It's Batman and it's Joker in one character. Oh geez, he's the greatest detective and the greatest supervillain. It's a fun idea. It's not the best comic I've ever read, but I really enjoyed it as just a riff. It was fun. It was much lighter. It was more of like a popcorn entertainment style comic, but I don't know. I got something out of it. The best example of this sort of hook, this what is your story, what is your take on Batman, the best angle I've seen on this world since I've gotten into comics is Batman White Knight. So this is Sean Gordon Murphy, writer-illustrator, who is top tier, and that series is coming back actually later this month. And the idea there is that Joker goes sane. He kind of, Jack Napier, who's the human that became Joker, the guy, before all the makeup and the clown stuff, that he basically suppresses the Joker part. That part recedes, and he wants to become mayor. He wants to rid Gotham of Batman. He turns good and is positioning Batman as bad. It's a great turntable story. It plays with the ramifications of that one twist. It's a great clean hook up top, and throughout the story you find more and more changes and implications and hooks. It's delicate and detailed. The characters are so human and thought out. It's really passionately made. I'm rereading that story right now, actually, and it is the best artwork I've seen in a Batman comic and the most in-depth human rendered story that I've encountered. I really, really love that one. Maybe we'll talk about that in another episode. So what's the pattern here that I've noticed? The stories that really speak to me, it's truly skilled, ruthless storytellers charting the butterfly effect of one great wrinkle. It just has to be one great wrinkle or twist for the Batman mythology, and then you chase that wrinkle throughout Gotham to study the implications of it. I know that that's a lot to ask, and I know that you can't do that on a monthly basis, right? Which is probably why I'm not interested in the monthly titles. But when these special twists, when these events sort of come along, it's unbelievable. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Last night I read a story. It is called, and this is an unwieldy title, but we'll shorten it. It was part of a larger event called Flashpoint, which I haven't read and I probably won't. It's called Flashpoint. This was like a sub mini-series within it. Flashpoint, Batman, Knights of Vengeance. Knight of Vengeance, and that's with a K, like the medieval thing. Knight of Vengeance is what we're going to refer to this thing as. It is 3 issues. It is one of these what-if series written by Brian Azzarello, and the art is Eduardo Risso. Brian Azzarello I actually have some experience with. One of the few comics that crossed over into my world when I was growing up was his grimy, disgusting, awesome Joker graphic novel. It's under 100 pages. It's dirty and messy and freaky. And in my more recent comic experience, Brian Azzarello worked with Frank Miller, who I've already gushed about, and every time we've talked about Batman, and all of those episodes I talk about Frank Miller. He worked with Miller to write Dark Knight Returns 3, which was really good, I think better than the second one. And Eduardo Risso, who's the artist here, he's done some gorgeous black and white Batman work with Azzarello in the past. So what is Knight of Vengeance? I am going to walk through that really, really briefly, show you the spoilers. I'm going to spoil the whole thing. I'm going to tell you why this thing hooked me and really put me on my ass at midnight when I thought I was just reading a nice little Batman story and I was going to go to bed. And this thing just punched me in the face for 76 pages. So, Knight of Vengeance. What's the hook? Thomas Wayne is Batman. He's the one who survived that night in the alley. Bruce was killed. So you immediately, you start to play out that hypothesis in your head. Older, bitter, a more brutal Batman. He's got a red accent, not the yellow. He's got red eyes in a lot of this. And his relationship with Gordon is less avuncular and much more of a concerned brotherly relationship. There's an interesting shuffle going on in their relationship, and they're very, very close. He's really the only friend that Batman, this version of Batman, has, and Gordon also doesn't have a family. You see sort of that concern ripple through his life and change the course that he takes as a character. So Thomas Wayne has opened Wayne Casino as his little business venture instead of the, vague charity or philanthropy. And Thomas Wayne, in this Wayne Casino, he's observing and kind of tempting crime. Like the penguin works for him. He's sort of like keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. It's a really interesting hook, and I feel like that could have been pursued if this series had gone longer than just being a 3-issue miniseries, but that restraint is part of why this world feels so full and lived in. It is a gesture at depth. You see that you glance off the side and this world is alive. Of course, there's more than you can explore. Of course, there's more you can dig into. It really helps flesh out the world and hint at all of these other stories that are possible. You don't need to actually plumb all the depth of everything you set up. It's a really nice, quick bit of world building that impressed me. So the drama of this story begins, for me at least, as Harvey Dent's kids are kidnapped by the Joker. You've introduced Batman, the new version of Batman, and Gordon. You've seen their relationship and their differences. They're very similar men, but there is a desperation that looks really different on them. And this was the first moment that felt breathless and agonizing in a way I wasn't expecting from a Batman comic, because Batman can be one of the lightest characters in fiction too. But there are these small details. The way Gordon's hair flies up and settles down and kind of shoots back again in the wind, or he's running towards this horror show of what's happened to Harvey Dent's kids, and the Joker, you see just flashes of the Joker and the kids tied up. And it's awful. It's really awful. And the minor expressions on Thomas's face, hidden under the Batman cowl, you see suggestions of the flashback of what happened to Bruce. You know that he's seeing the echoes of this new scenario to his origin story. And it's not explored through actual flashback panels for a while. There are moments of just horror, twangs of pain and recognition before you get there. It's really, for being a really bombastic story that makes these sweeping changes, there are moments of subtlety that are even more punishing. But first, we follow Gordon, who gets to Wayne Manor, I believe, is the house where the kids are being held. He gets there first, and he shoots. He shoots Joker. He sees Joker and shoots. But it's not Joker. It is one of the kids standing on the chair, and Joker has kind of made up the kid, so it's a similar silhouette. It's nighttime. So this is the first really fucked up part that stuck with me. This is the moment that elevated this story to, oh shit, if they land this moment right, if they land the ramifications of this right and play with its effect on Thomas, maybe this will be one of those stories that I mentioned, like all of those examples earlier in this episode. And it's not the fact that he shot a kid. There are plenty of stories where they shoot kids. It's like shooting a dog. It's the thing you're not supposed to do. You'll lose the audience. It's memorable, but it could be seen as like a cheap shortcut to emotion. But that's not the thing that screwed me up here. It was the duct tape on the kid's face that Joker had painted a smile on. And it tricks your brain. You see someone who's just been shot, who's fallen, who's starting to cry, and your brain can't process the fear and the terror because there's a smile on the tape. I mean, it sounds like I'm stupid describing this, but it's just difficult. Your brain is trying to process two very, very different signals at the same time, and it really just sticks. It's the monkey wrench in the machine, and it holds your emotions there as the tears start to run down. It's not just the shock, the horror, the violence of the moment. It's disturbing. And that's the moment where Joker shows up and slashes Gordon's throat. So this really becomes, in just a page or two, one of those stories that I will now reference when I talk to people about what Batman can be. And this is the moment where Thomas shows up, and we see sort of a restaging of his new origin story. He screams Martha's name. And for me, this felt like the perfect transition into, okay, let's finally see what happened. Because if you're a father and your son has just been shot or your wife has just been shot, you're going to yell for, both of them. So that's what I read by the sort of Martha invocation. And we transition cleanly into the reveal, the reverberations of that first change. We see details of the night. We see one panel, clean flashback of the gun going off and Martha's pearls falling. and Bruce on the ground. It's an interesting twist from the parents being killed. And here's the reverberation. Here's that butterfly effect that I talked about before. Thomas Wayne is Batman. Bruce died. But we find out here, at this last moment, while we're getting 12 other gut punches, that Martha didn't die. She survived and was poisoned and ruined by the loss of her kid and the random cruelty of this act of violence and just the senselessness of it. And in a move similar to the black and white in the second to last episode of The Haunting of Bly Manor, there's a niche reference for Maggie, she becomes the Joker. This recontextualizes everything we've seen so far. Gordon's concern for Batman, Batman's horror and urgency pursuing the Joker, and the horror of this particular person kidnapping and facilitating the murder of children. It's true, broken, shattered insanity. And the story ends with Batman getting through to her for a moment. It's like sidebar for a second. You remember Heath Ledger cuts, open the side of his mouth, and that's how he gets the big smile. Martha has that too here, but it's like some of it was stitched back together. In flashback, you see the moment she cuts that. Part of it is stitched back together, but part of it kind of hangs open, so you see some of the teeth through it. And Eduardo Risso does such a gorgeous job showing some of the kind of silhouette shots of her, but he includes the cut and a couple of the teeth in the side. And there's really something deranged and disgusting about the way this story is rendered, and it really sticks with you and makes you do an episode about it. The comic ends with a moment of Batman getting through to Martha. There is a gesture at the larger story. He teases this possibility that I guess is part of that Flashpoint event that this is a sub-series of. And he teases the possibility of changing the world so that Bruce is the one who survives. They share a moment of humanity. I mean, they're exploring a what if for a second in the middle of a what if story for us. That loss kind of hangs in the air around them as this new devastation that they've created together sort of settles in. And she tries to run off. I think there's a moment of clarity, and she tries to run off and just flee from the terror of this situation and falls into a bat cave. Not the bat cave, but kind of a hole in the ground, and there are a bunch of bats in there. And we see her dead. Again, interesting little Bly Manor comparison. So this is a 3-issue story. 3 issues with multiple sledgehammer moments. One great hook that teases out 3 or 4 other devastating hooks along the way. It's a wonderfully efficient story. I mean, every scene that seems simple the first time through is complicated and doubled back and recontextualized so that I imagine if I read this again, or if you read it now after listening to this, there's layers upon layers. It's 3 issues, but with 6 or 12 issues of story going in there. Every stroke of the pen is doing 4 different things. This is a fun little transition. I found out that this story is being reprinted. The first week of April, these 3 issues, Flashpoint, Batman, Night of Vengeance, they're being reprinted in one comic book. And it's not a big hardcover thing that's ridiculously overpriced like a lot of these things are. It is, I think, $6.99. My ask to you guys is that you go to a comic shop. Even if you just go and browse, I would ask you to find your local comic shop and go. Because that one visit that Maggie and I had in the first couple months of COVID, I guess. There were all sorts of precautions and things. It was the moment that turned my experience through a shitty, awful, horrible pandemic. I mean, we started COVID in New York, and you remember what COVID was like in New York. Freezer trucks and rolling morgues and public graves and all sorts of, really horrific things that people seem to have forgotten about. But we got down to Texas, and when we started going to the comic shop every Wednesday, with the mask, with the hand sanitizer, all of that, it showed me a new medium. It showed me, it helped me reconnect with Batman. I talked about this a little bit during the year 1 discussion, during the Batman movie discussion. It helped me reconnect with my past and my mom and learn more about a character that I loved. Learn some source material for adaptations that I enjoyed. But it also helped me find so much more. I have a whole bookshelf full of comic omnibuses and graphic novels. I have a whole box full of floppies now. it has given me something fantastic every Wednesday. Who looks forward to Wednesdays? And now I get to go with Maggie and find new art, and we get to show each other stuff and browse. And in theory, it's a lot more affordable than buying, novels every week, but it's fun and immediate and colorful and loud and takes chances, and there's something magical about comics. And going into a shop, I have found more of a community than I ever found when I was really into music and really into vinyl and record shops, because every single time I went into a record shop, I disliked the employees. They were just like nasty and elitist and distant and condescending and huffy, and comic shop employees, really to a person, that I've met so far in multiple different shops. They're kind, they're informed, they're enthusiastic. I mean, our main shop we were in last week, and one of the employees that we know, he was like running by, going to do something else in the back of the store, and he saw the comic I was holding. He was like, "That issue is amazing. You're going to love that." And he just kept going. Like, it really felt like a community. And they make recommendations. They show you different covers and different options of things. I've had a great time in that world. And yeah, I just want to recommend a comic that kicked my ass last night. I love the idea that Batman is an American myth. I love the different tellings. I mean, there's almost this oral history of the character as he is shared by all of these creative teams. He's tweaked and changed, and some people sequelize a classic story that they loved and set it within that continuity. There are so many versions of this and commentaries. There can be structural critiques about police corruption. There can be mental health depictions and discussions about Arkham Asylum or the Joker. Or there's so much that can be done here, and it feels like something exciting and ongoing that you can be a part of. You can turn the page and, oh no, someone slashed Gordon's throat. That's really upsetting. It accomplishes a jump scare like nothing but movies can. Comics can show the passage of time. This is something we discussed in the Batman Year One episode. You can show the passage of time like no other medium can hope to accomplish. There are magical advantages to this art form. And, I've completed 4 full comics now as a writer and artist, and I'm working on a lot more. And I love exploring this new medium and possibilities as a reader and a creator. And this story was one that I just wanted to share with you guys. Thank you for joining me. I do enjoy talking to you guys on these little solo episodes. And I'll see you soon.